Let's go. All right. Glad to have you.
Glad to
You
be here.
are joining in. You are, just so you know, you're our official first guest.
Yay! That's an
If you
honor.
didn't know, thank you. I don't think it would work any other way or be any better from anybody else that we've got history with.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so it means a lot. Thank you for coming on. Some of your credentials. I've seen the work you've been doing. It's amazing. But since you're here, I guess let's run down our lovely guest, Miss Mrs. Rufus.
Yes.
So, entrepreneur, multiple businesses,
Mm-hmm.
um, photos by Prue,
Yeah.
for those that don't know, featured in multiple publications, The Huffington Post, Modern Luxury Weddings, Voyage Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
She's the go-to person in her community, for those that don't know, here in Atlanta. Services rendered by myself and wife. Our, how do you put this? Our bridal shoot
Yeah.
or our engagement shoot was a very
Mm-hmm.
big milestone for anyone. We celebrated 13 years a couple months ago, and we were
Woohoo!
looking through the pictures, and there were the pictures of us taking photos in Stone Mountain. So I'm
Oh,
very
yeah.
grateful.
I remember
Uh,
that.
you were there to capture that moment in our lives,
I remember
to say
that.
the least. You've
Mm-hmm.
also done a Christmas shoot for us.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been on a Christmas card. That was a little suggestive. We got a lot of positive feedback from that. I think
That
that's
was
the first time.
pre-kids, wasn't
That was our, so just so you know, that was our first outing since having a child.
it?
That was our first. So we
Oh.
went to a banquet. For those that don't know, we went to a banquet, and Photos by Prue was set up at the banquet. You were the featured photographer for the event,
Mm-hmm.
Prudence and Roof and Keto,
Mm-hmm.
and we got some pictures out of it.
Yeah.
We put those on the cards. I did my thing, and I got a lot of phone calls for the lines that I put underneath the card, for those that don't know. So
You put your
I
presidential
think,
lines underneath the card.
well, I think it was something to the effect of something about were you naughty this year or something like that.
Oh,
Nonetheless, uh, I liked it. It's still a personal favorite.
no
Um,
surprise. It suits you.
so that business, led her to see a need in the market, her photography work, which led to Master Your Mint.
Yes.
Now, I was told after doing some research that that has always been your passion, but I want to hear you tell your story. Before we get to that, Prudence specializes in small business and personal tax and financial consulting. She has over 20 years experience in the industry, and the icing on the cake, she went to the same alma mater as my lovely wife. Both of you have degrees in business from Georgia State
Yes.
University.
Yes. Yes.
Wife of one, mother of two. Um, she made her own people, and she is their leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I make people.
let's get to it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's who I am in a nutshell.
Tell me, how did we get here, Prudence?
How did we get here? Right? It's I want to say it's divine intervention. It wasn't my choice. So life started out for me in the finance world. That's what I went to school for. That's what I went to Georgia State. I've worked for banks. I've worked for insurance companies. I've worked as a financial planner. I've, done a bunch of stuff. The job that I liked the most was when I worked with small businesses who would literally come into the office with like a shoebox full of receipts and needed someone to make sense of them. So needed someone to tell them what their income was, what their expenses were, help them arrange their estate planning, file their taxes, make sense of what's happening with their business money so that they could live the life that they dreamed about. Because most of these business owners were making money, but they weren't necessarily sure what the profit was. And the only time they would even look at or measure the profit was when tax time came, which that's where the box.
Why does that sound like every business owner, myself included in
Yeah.
America. I remember seeing my
Hmm.
mother, similar situations. She was a business owner.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
don't ask
truly
me.
it's truly an overwhelming thing because people who start businesses are really good at whatever the business is, right? So if you're starting a restaurant, usually the person starting the restaurant is really good at cooking. Or if you're starting a dance school, you're really good at being a dance instructor, but you're not
Mhm.
necessarily good at managing the money. You're not necessarily good at pricing. You're not necessarily good at paying taxes. You're not necessarily good at paying yourself. Um, and so that was the job that I really, really enjoyed the most. Fast forward to like me having children. And there was a point when my daughter was born, she was about less than a year, where I
Okay.
realized that how I wanted to parent was in conflict with the job that I was doing. And so I left the job, not because I wanted to start a business. I left the job because I wanted to parent a certain way.
Okay.
And in doing that, it gave me more time and more space for photography. And so photography became kind of like my outlet. It became something to do so that I wasn't just talking to infants all day long. And so that I had something that was exclusively mine. And,
I
I was
remember
really just
those days.
yes, really
Coming
just
home
enjoying
and
myself. Yeah.
yeah,
Coming
that
home
was
and
rough.
yeah, those are some very, very special years. And so in the middle of that, um, I realized that, well, I started getting a bunch of invitations, or I should say my camera started getting a bunch of invitations. And
Mhm.
so from that, a business was born because everybody who had a baby shower were like, well, are you coming? Are you bringing your camera? Are you coming to my birthday party? Are you bringing your camera? Oh, I want to invite you to such and such.
At some
Well, are
point, you
you
got to
bringing your
collect some money.
camera? Right. So at some point, I had to charge for my time and I had to charge so that I could grow as a photographer. And so
Okay.
that's how photography evolved for me. Well, in the middle of navigating photography and navigating like the world of photography and photographers, questions would come up within the photography community about finance and business and stuff like that. And I would answer them. I would answer them just out of a genuine place of sharing. But just like photography, Master Your Mint evolved because I realized that I was spending a lot of time serving people who had genuine questions, who had genuine needs about how to set up and run and manage their business and manage their business finances. And so for me, it's kind of like not kind of is it's the culmination of my two worlds collided. It's my logical brain, logical mathematical brain colliding with my creative brain. So both operate, and both are necessary for me to function. So most of the people that I serve are photographers or are adjacent to the photography community. So I might serve a photographer who also runs a therapy practice,
Wait, wait,
or
wait.
I might serve a photographer, but I might also serve their husband who runs a tutoring business.
Oh, wow.
And so, the world kind of expanded for me. I would say maybe 75% of the people who I support are in the creative space somehow. And the others are people who are in various occupation therapists who somehow are attracted to me. So I have quite a few therapists that I work with. Again, you're a therapist, you're really good at therapy, but you're not necessarily good at the business of running a therapy office. And so
Okay. I understand
my
that.
right. My job is to help people to make sense of what's happening in the money in their business so that they can use their money to live the life that they dreamed about, whatever that life is. So for some of us, the life that we dreamed about is being able to go on vacation. For some of us, the life that we dreamed about is being able to work 3 days a week. For some of us, the life that we dreamed about is being able to buy purses, or some people is being able to, get as much jewelry as they want. Like all of us have our own measure of what makes us happy, and my job is to make sure that you have the money to fulfill those dreams.
Those
So,
dreams don't sound far-fetched, but
um,
with no blueprint, I guess they might as well be.
exactly, exactly. That's the thing
So,
about it. And far fetched varies, right? So someone might say, okay, I want to save $1 million. Okay, well, let's talk about how much money you're making right now, and let's talk about what your expenses are, and let's talk about what the path to $1 million might look like. And we walk through that. Maybe you start out with a goal of $10,000, $20,000, and we work on what incrementally growing towards your dream would look like. But it's pretty magical to see the light bulb turn on with people, with people with managing their money. We work with spreadsheets a lot. I'll create spreadsheets. We'll make sense of them. I'll show you how to use them. Sometimes we're using other programs to get the numbers. Like, it's whatever works for you, in terms of analyzing
So it can be simple.
what's happening. It can be simple. The goal for me is not necessarily to simplify the information, but to present it in a way that each person can understand. Because I'm dealing with creatives, so I can't just give a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers. Those numbers have to make sense, and they have to equate to something that the person wants.
Okay. So I guess my next question, what, and I generally plan on asking this to everybody because it's something that nobody really wants to talk about. What does most of your customers' relationship with money look like? Meaning, is it a positive relationship? Is it a negative relationship? Is it an unknown relationship? You don't have to give, specifics, but, everybody's situation is different. Some people, they claim engineers are better with money because they manage small things very well. What do creatives and money generally look like, or people in your client base generally look like their relationship with money is out before your services?
Right. Here's the truth. Nobody shows up to talk to me because their finances are in order. They just don't. It's like you don't go to the mechanic because your car's working.
Well, there you go.
So most people who show up to me have questions, concerns. They're afraid. They're embarrassed. There's a lot of shame happening. And they need a nurturing space that is non-judgmental, where they can talk about, 1, what their dreams are, 2, what their failures are, and 3, how to navigate through that. And so I show up without judgment. Literally, I show up without judgment. I show up with saying, okay, we have a pile of receipts. Let's talk through the pile of receipts. There are times when I get on calls with clients and they just need support to open the bills. And we sit there with the box of bills and we open them one by one and say, okay, this is how much I owe to this person. This is what I need to pay here. This is what I need to pay here. Because there's an overwhelming feeling of desperation. And my job is to help everyone have a calm, calculated approach to money, because money doesn't make you happy, but getting the things that money can buy can certainly add to the quality of your life.
So, personal question. So you're helping people, but how's your relationship with money, I guess? Is it good, bad, indifferent? Like, or better yet, how did we get here? I mean, or are you trying to help others while helping yourself? Like,
for me, money has been like a roller coaster type of situation. And that's why I understand like the shame part of it, right? Because, okay, I went to school for the money thing. I have the experience with working with people who make hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, as well as people who make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. But for me, the money journey has not been without my own personal trials. It's not been a smooth story. It's not like life ain't been no crystal stair type of thing. I've been through every struggle that you can think of that people have with money. I've been through that, sans a repossession and a bankruptcy. And I probably could have experienced both of those, but by the grace of God, I didn't. And I think that's the thing about it, is that I know what that shame feels like. I know what it feels like to drive a luxury car and not be able to afford to put gas in it. And I also know how the decisions that I made to get there that sent me in that tumble. I also know the decisions that I made to climb out of it. And because I can have those frank and open conversations, it humanizes the experience. So I remember when we were going through like the most heart-wrenching, tough part of our financial journey, And I remember asking God, like, why would you put me in this? And, for me, the reverberating response was so that you can talk to people from experience rather than theory.
Wow. That's crucial.
And
I can relate to
so,
that.
yeah. And so
That's the crazy
I can
part.
talk from
I can relate to
experience.
that.
Yeah. I can talk from
So,
experience because I think we all face some kind of roller coaster in life. For some of us, it shows up as money. For many of us, it shows up as money, really. But for some, it shows up as health. For some, it shows up as relationship challenges. For some, it shows up as, trouble with careers. Like it could show up in many ways, but we all will have like a place in life where we struggle. And I think for a lot of us, it shows up in the places where we have judged others the harshest.
mm, that's a tough one. We live in a social media society. Everybody wants to show and tell,
Mm-hmm.
or not tell,
Right.
show something that's not quite.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask people, are you the person on social media that you are in real life?
Right.
And that's people think that you're being harsh when you say stuff like that, but it's the world we live in now.
It's the world we live in.
So, I guess, so my next question would be, how have your services impacted your clients? If you're giving me these stories, this journey, how have you impacted your clients' lives then?
So I think the client that I don't want to say I'm most proud of, because I'm proud of everybody, because everybody has journeyed differently. But there was one person who reached out to me, and they were homeless at the time, literally homeless.
Wow.
And that was a journey, because homeless with children, by the way. And that's quite a thing. And in our last conversation, the yearly income was well over $250,000.
Ooh, I love that. I love it. I love it.
Bought a house cash. Like we walked through the journey because her goals were very specific. And one of them was to never be homeless again. So then it was like, okay, so how do we make sure that happens? And one of the primary things was to secure someplace to live. And so that I think that speaks for itself. There's another young lady that I've worked with, and when we started out, she had almost $40,000 just in bills, not debt, just bills. And we walked through that, and we cleared them all up. Came with some sacrifices, but cleared them all up. The clarity that almost every call that I end with someone, they said, "Oh, I'm very much clearer on that." I had a conversation with somebody today who runs a multiple six-figure business and wasn't able to do a profit loss report. So today we walked through the profit loss report. And then we walked through the profit loss report. We talked about, okay, this is how much you made in profit, and this is what you need to do with the profit. This is how much you need to set aside for taxes. This is how much you need to set aside for savings. This is how much you can pay yourself. Then we went back to their personal budget and we said, okay, so this is how much you're paying yourself. Does that meet your need? Does that meet the need for your household? And so then we walked through that. What were the monthly obligations in your household? And let's make sure that your business is generating enough money to meet those goals. So,
you know what's wild? People assume, no, I'm sorry to cut you, but you know what's wild? People assume that because you are at a certain financial level, you know these things through osmosis. Most people, I mean, I personally, if I didn't have my wife who does the finances, most of this stuff, even though I took a class on it, I have a degree. Don't ask me how to do it.
Yeah. That's the truth. I think we and I know that, right? Because I lived that. I lived to have them theoretical knowledge, but not actually putting it in practice for myself. I've lived in that space. But I think everybody has a thing that they're good at. The interesting thing about money is that regardless of what you're good at, you have to have some information about money because you need money to live, regardless of what you do. And you could hand over your finances to somebody else. You literally could. But What you won't know is whether they are operating ethically. What you won't know is whether they're operating accurately if you don't have some sense of understanding of it as well. I say to clients, especially tax clients, I say to them, I said, if I make a mistake on your taxes, I might get a fine, I might serve some jail time. However, the heaviest penalty will come to you, the individual. And so whatever I hand over to you in terms of your finances, whatever conversations we have about your finances, they have to make sense to you because your life is in the balance. And so I take great care in explaining things in detail, but in understandable detail.
Wow, that's crucial. So I'm in a similar, so I'm in a financial service type of industry. We're in the precious metal space. We see people that are planning, and we see people that are in dire straits.
Yeah.
I like to get people where I'm not a financial planner, but I like to say I'm the financial planner's planner because we provide hard assets, the rainy day fund. We literally provide the rainy day fund. When they want to cash out, they come see us. Whether they have something of value or they don't have something of value, they generally try and come see me because when things go sideways, that's when people come see me. So I have those talks. I don't have the credentials to give them the detailed advice or path that you're going to give them, but someone like yourself is, I'm sure everybody needs in their life in some capacity, no matter how good you are. The experts I found out in life generally have a coach. Everybody has a coach of some kind.
That's true. I have several.
There you go. And I'm starting to get to that point where I realize I can't do it all, no matter how good I am. Yeah. And so I guess you're that coach to have in their corner.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes you just need another ear.
Okay.
Sometimes we get so singularly focused on whatever it is that we're doing day to day. And sometimes you need somebody else to say, okay, turn that way. And you're like, yeah, I should have known. But hearing somebody else say it, really does make a difference. So yeah, I believe in coaches and therapists. I believe in both.
Comes to mind from a personal experience, because you said coach. My accountant gave me some advice a number of years back, and we did not heed the accountant's advice. Would it have made things better? I don't know. Probably. But do people always take your advice? This is not I'm not trying to say this is an I told you so moment, but on average, if somebody takes your advice or doesn't take your advice, do they generally come out on the winning side? Or what would you say to that?
So it's a funny space because I'm generally not the person saying do this or don't do this, right? What I will say is that if you do this, this is the likely consequence. Or if you do this, this is the likely benefit. Does that fit in line with what your goals are? Okay. So I'm not necessarily saying do this or don't do this. What I'm helping most people to do is to structure their wants in line with what's happening with their money. And so the decision is still yours. There are times when someone may want to make a large purchase, and I don't necessarily, in my mind, think that that's the right thing to do. So we'll talk through it. We'll talk through what will happen if you make that large purchase. How is that going to affect your other long-term goals? What's the impact to your day-to-day, month-to-month budget? And so once you have all of that information, you can then say, okay, this is going to decrease my savings by $10,000. But this is also going to increase my enjoyment by $10,000. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I think where I show up is that I want you to make the decision with clarity. I want you to make an emotional decision with concrete numbers, logical mindset.
You said you want someone to make that emotional decision?
I want them to make an emotional decision with a logical mindset. Does that make sense? That's a good hybrid. If you make the decision and it's just emotional, then you won't have looked at everything. But if every decision you make is logical, then you're missing out on the quality of life. So somehow or the
True.
other, the two have to merge.
Okay, that sounds like sound advice to me, because people always stress, oh, you used emotion. In television, you always see that, in the trading world,
Hmm.
it's no, you have to be a machine, you have to be methodical. But at what point do you realize, you know, there's some emotion that actually comes into it, whether you
Yeah,
want it to be or not?
I think it's all
So,
emotional. I truly think that every single one of our decisions are emotional. Even the quote unquote logical ones, right? So for some people are like super savers and some people are super spenders. But if you go back and ask questions about, okay, so why are you a super saver? And it'll usually trace back to something in childhood. So that person might have experienced severe poverty, or they might have
mhm.
had a parent who was a spender, and so that caused trouble in their life. That's still an emotional decision, even though they're logically saving tremendous amounts of money. Same thing if somebody's a spender. Somebody's a spender, you go back and talk to them, it usually goes back to something in their childhood. Maybe they felt deprived as a child and they don't want to feel deprived now. So
So they're gonna blow it off.
it still goes back. I think all of our decisions really goes back to emotions. We just sometimes don't have the grace to not judge people for making their decisions, because their emotional reasoning behind their logical decision is not the same as ours.
Okay, I can follow that.
Does that make sense?
That,
So
that makes sense.
I'll give you an example that shows up with saving. So one of the things I tell people, I said, you know what your life is. You know, if you're the person that if you have $10 in your pocket, you're going to spend the $10, right? You know who you are. So I say, okay, sometimes you have to convert your savings into assets that make it more difficult for you to spend it. That might mean that you need to buy a CD. That might mean you need to buy bonds. That might mean you need to buy jewelry
That's what I tell my
or precious
customers.
metals.
Here at Alex Lexington, we're here to service all parts of the community.
Whether your budget is $30 or $300,000, in store or online, we're here to meet your needs.
So from our family to yours, see you soon.
Right. So that
Yeah,
it's much harder to
I take
liquefy and
away
exchange. Yes.
the impulsive decision.
Take away the impulsiveness of the decision. So you're saving and your logic tells you that you need to save, but your emotions tell you what your habits are around saving. And so you have to make a logical decision that protects your emotional typical response, whatever that happens to be.
I do it for myself. Growing up, I didn't plan to be in this business. I kind of married into it, but my habits are what they were. I was good at saving.
Uh-huh.
I used to give my mother my checks.
Nice.
People said I was crazy when I was a kid, but my first job, I worked at the Y. I used to give my mother my checks, and I saved at $5.25 an hour, and I bought my
Nice.
first computer for like $800. And I would have never been able to do that if I would have had control of my checks.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of do a hide for myself kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
And in the world I'm in right now, I just
Yeah.
stash it in,
Mm-hmm.
the asset that I have access to. But I tell it to people, everybody thinks, oh, you should just put it in a savings account. Why don't you just put it in a savings account? If it was that easy, everybody would have
Yeah.
saved money.
That doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes you need to put it
So
in a savings account, but sometimes you need to put it in a savings account in a bank across town and not get a card for it, so that when you
with
need it,
no
you gotta
card,
drive to that bank.
I've heard a lot of people say that.
Oh,
I don't knock it, because whatever by any means that you have to get to your goal is necessary.
yeah,
Um,
you know what it is.
what would be some tips? I'm not saying give out your secret sauce, the formula, but what would be some tips that any and everybody, of course, outside of the ways to stash your money in a way that works best for you, that you would recommend that anybody should regardless of circumstance, some value. Our goal is to give people value in their lives in a holistic way. So what's some value that you could, bless us with today?
I think the number one thing, and it's very, very simple, is that I think everybody needs to operate with a budget. Now,
Budget?
Yes, budget.
I don't need no budget.
You absolutely do.
I work hard. Why do I need a budget?
That's why you need a budget. And the mantra around budgets is that people tend to think of it as this like restrictive document, but it's not, right? A budget is a living, breathing document. It changes. It changes as your needs change. It changes as your emotions change. It changes as your desires and your wants change. I'll give you an example. We have a budget this month, right? The budget did not include a television. We, as in me and my household, me and my husband.
Okay.
Right? The budget did not include a new television. However, my husband's emotions during football season require that he get a new television. It's not in the budget. The money is in the bank account, but it's not in the budget. However, because we have been maintaining a budget, we know how much flex we have within that budget. So we know, okay, so this month is a month where it's not a heavy spending month. But August, when school starts, is a really heavy spending month. So that might not be the month where you do the splurge. But October might be the month where you do the splurge. But because you have a budget, you kind of know where your parameters are. So you're not really, you're making a splurge, because I think splurges are an important part of living. I think you need to do things that you enjoy with your money. Because if you're not enjoying your money, then really, why?
And you lose track and you lose focus real fast.
You lose track, you lose focus. I think in the science part of it, right? So cortisol is like the stress hormone.
Okay.
And when you're really stressed, your cortisol levels are high, right?
Okay.
Dopamine is the happy hormone. Well, when you buy something or spend money on something that makes you happy, your cortisol levels go down, your dopamine levels go up. Okay. Some people spend a lot because they like that dopamine hit, right? Well, if you're one of those people that likes the dopamine hit, then you need to know if you have $100 dopamine value this month or $1,000 dopamine value this month.
Ooh.
But if you live with your cortisol level high all the time, you will die early and you will live miserable. So you have to reward yourself, if you want to call it that. You have to do the things that make you happy. And part of that involves money. It might not be buying a thing. It might be spending money on a service. But you need to know how much money do you have in order to be able to hit your goals, meet your needs, and enjoy life.
That is a fair assessment, I would say. The line that I always tell people, or that I would, not always, but I tell people say, well, you should do this. And I say, that's not in the budget right now. Mm-hmm. I used to say, I don't have money, but it's not that I don't have money. It's just I don't have money for that.
Yes.
That's my adult statement. That's my adult version of me talking.
Now that I don't have money, I didn't budget for that this month. That's not in the budget. But at the same time, if that same dollar amount became an emergency expense for you, you have the money and you would spend it.
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
I got a follow-up. What is your vision for Master Your Mint?
Ooh.
Where do you see this? Where do you see this going? You can give me a time frame. You don't have to give me a time frame. I'm a big dreamer, so I've got big goals. But I want to know what do you see? What can we expect to see? If somebody sees you in 2 days, please don't say, "Well, what happened? Your dream fell apart." These things take time. But tell me where you want to be.
So behind the scenes,
dreaming big.
Behind the scenes, the stuff that's in the works but not quite yet published is there are some courses that are actually recorded already. We're just in the process of developing the marketing and the software stuff behind the scenes for it to be published.
Okay.
So there's at least 3 courses right now that are probably 80% of the way ready to be published, right?
I love it.
Yeah, right. And there are 2 books that are coming out. One is going to be a 30-day guide to getting your money together. And the other one is going to be targeted to business owners to get your finances together. So those are 2 things that are coming out that can be used at any time, any place, don't require
Please
a
send me a
conversation
link.
with me. I will send you a link as soon as
Can
it's
I get a
published.
question? Can I get a signed copy? Because I do believe in support
Oh!
of the small business. I want to say I was there, before
I know.
Unreachable.
Yeah, I will.
So
I will. First of all, I will always be reachable to you. So let's start there. Two,
who you know, who
right?
you know.
Two, absolutely. I will absolutely get you a signed copy as soon as everything's published and ready to go.
Thank
That is
you.
my promise to you. But yeah, those are in the works. In the meantime, most of the people that I work with them one-on-one. I also speak at conferences and stuff like that. And when I speak at conferences, I'm usually speaking to like a mass of people at a time.
Oh wow.
The one-on-one service that I do is one-on-one. And so you can always go to my website, masteryourmint.com, and you can sign up for a clarity call. And we can have a conversation about what your goals are, where you want to go, and then decide if we're a good fit. Because the person you're working with and talking about your money with has to be a good fit, because it's such a vulnerable space. It's a space that requires trust. If you don't trust me, then our conversations will be very limited in scope and limited in the growth that is possible for you. So we'll have that conversation, and then we'll decide, do we need to meet monthly, weekly, bi-weekly? Occasionally there are people who have crises and we might meet twice a week. But
Really?
generally most people, I'm meeting with them like 2 to 3 times a month to kind of talk about where they are, where the goals are, and how they're executing them. Usually the conversations are pretty intense for like the first 60 to 90 days, and then we kind of back off as things become clearer, and then we pick up, and because life throws curveballs. So, it's flexible and it's based on your needs. But eventually there will be courses in the short run. There'll be courses that you can get to any day or time of the night or day.
Well, I look forward to it. And so you gave me some information, but how can people reach you? Is your website the Master Your Mint?
It's Master
the only way to reach you?
MasterYourMint.com. That is the best way to reach me if you're trying to reach me directly, because there's a link to my calendar there, and you can get on my calendar and set up a time to meet. I'm also on Facebook. There's a community on Facebook, the Master Your Mint community. You can reach me on Instagram. You can reach me on Facebook as well.
Okay.
Master Your Mint page. But truly, the best way to reach me is to go to the website, because you can set an appointment. You'll get access to my calendar, and we'll actually put a meeting in my calendar where we can set aside time, dedicated time, where I will talk to you about whatever your financial concerns are.
So masteryourmint.com.
Masteryourmint.com.
Get on the calendar.
Right. And right now, those clarity calls are free. They're just 15-minute calls. They won't be free forever, but right now they are still free. And it's just a 15-minute call. We talk about where you are, where you want to be, what your challenges are, and how we can overcome those challenges. And then you get to make a decision as to whether you want to work more intensely to get to that sweet spot, whatever that sweet spot is for you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I've got a final question.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a different era now. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask, how has COVID impacted your business and or your client base?
Ooh.
Or has it impacted you at all?
It's absolutely impacted me personally, and it's definitely impacted business. It's impacted business in the space that during COVID, people had time to think, and they had time to pause from the normal hustle bustle routine of life. And they had time to really evaluate stuff that they never got to think about before. Stuff about their relationships, stuff about their house, stuff about their career, and definitely stuff about their money. And so it gave a space where people had time to evaluate and didn't have to rush as much. So I absolutely worked quite a bit during COVID. There was less in-person stuff, mostly virtual, which actually was a really good thing. Because we're virtual, then the limitation of being in a specific location to meet with someone doesn't exist.
Travel.
Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly. And then you don't have to get dressed. You can come on, in your robe and your head wrap. We don't have to dress up. We're having a conversation about money. So, whereas if we were meeting in person, you have to kind of put on clothes and look decent, and all of those things. So,
All right.
so it worked in my favor.
All right. So that was my last, well, at least so I thought, last question for real this time.
Okay.
Is there anything that you would like people to know that I have not asked already?
You have asked the question, but I would like to reinforce it, is that your budget is the magic ticket to knowing what's happening with your finances. When you have the budget, you can know, okay, how much am I really paying in credit card payments each month? How much am I really paying in these subscriptions, these small subscriptions that I have? How much money do I have for the splurges that I want? If I want to go to the Maldives next year, how much money do I have to really allocate to that? And so you've asked the question, but I think people are so afraid of budgets because they're afraid to face the reality. But I want people to change their mindset around that and see it as a joyful document. This document actually puts in writing how to get to your goals, how to get the money to live the life you want. And it might indicate that you need to get a better job. It might indicate that you need to start a business. It might indicate that you need to raise your prices. But you'll know very clearly, okay, I'm raising my prices, and this is why.
I like that. I like that. All right. Well, it's been fun. I learned something. I've learned that I've done some right things and I've done some wrong things.
We all have.
But the goal is to improve. Yeah. Our goal here is to bring value to the lives of others. Yeah. Alex Lexington Network, the Presidential Minutes is what this particular segment is what we're calling. And I'm glad to have Prudence Rufus of Master Your Mint as our first official guest. Thank you, and see you soon.
See you soon. Take care. Thanks for having me.